Friday. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday to everybody, and welcome to Cub Chat Live. My name is Aaron. I'll be your host today. My co host, really, not really a guest, Audrey has been on here so many times. She's better at this than I am. She's the chairman of the National Cub Scout Committee. Audrey, how are you this afternoon?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for
Thank
asking.
Absolutely, and thanks so much for joining us today. As always, guys, it's been an exciting fall for Cub Scouts in general. We've had a nice increase in membership. Recruiting has gone great. So we've said it a few times before, but I don't think we can say it enough. Thanks so much for all
No,
of your
thank you
efforts
and
out
keep
there.
it up. Keep it up. Doing a great
Absolutely.
job. I know there's still some more joining events going on. I keep
Yep.
hearing from different people, so we're super excited about that.
Yeah, there's no
Excellent.
reason why Cub Scouts can't continue to join new families at any point in the fall, really on through the holidays into the spring. Keep it coming. We love it. We actually did an entire show about this topic earlier. Today's
Mhm.
topic is kind of similar to that. A lot of folks have seen a lot of growth. Maybe Audrey, before I have these, I got some questions for you. Before we get started, though, maybe just sort of give us an overview of what we're going to be talking about today.
Well, it as the lovely banner says, we're
Mm-hmm.
going to talk about identifying and recruiting strong leaders. So, the reason that you need strong leaders is because the scouts deserve that. And so we're going to talk about the contrast of a strong leader versus maybe just filling it with just the first available body, which is not a recommended practice. So
Yep.
we're give you some tools and ideas and things to think about, and maybe you've never found yourself in this position as a pack because of all of a sudden you've got this lovely exponential growth. So we're here to help you and some tools on how to do that.
Perfect, perfect. We've already got some folks in the comments. Shout out to Omed. Thank you for watching as usual. Hello, Wendy. Hello, Hike Mike, and hello to Wendy again, who has tagged some of her friends. It looks like. Good job, Wendy. Appreciate that. Please do tag your friends. Please do share this video, and please comment with any questions. We'll have Audrey here for the next 30 minutes or so. Feel free to chime in with any questions to get us started. Audrey, in sort of a general idea, why is it important to select strong leaders? And maybe you could also, as a little addendum, what do you mean when you say strong leader? Everybody has their strengths. You and I have our strengths. You might not have any weaknesses, Audrey, but I do. But so when you say strong leaders, kind of give us an idea. Why is this important? And, what makes a strong leader?
Well, that's a great question. So some of the things to think about is that every scout does deserve a qualified and enthusiastic leader. If you're speaking of, like, say, a den leader, but if you're speaking about, say, the treasurer, they can be a quiet, reserved person. They just need to really be good with numbers and making sure that things are balanced. So the skill sets for what we're talking about might be very different, and that is definitely something to consider. It's going to be the mindset is it needs to be a normal part of your scout pack planning. Um, there's going to be turnover regularly as scouts. Often the leaders are in with their scout, and then they move up as they cross over into Scouts BSA. And so you're going to have some natural gaps as it's moving forward. You're also going to have new dens coming in, whether that's lions or tigers, whatever entry point your pack has. You're going to be looking for new den leaders. And as we already kind of mentioned a little bit, it also might be some situations that you're not used to, like really big growth. All of a sudden, maybe you need two den leaders. Or if you had a den leader who was really good with a small group of, 5 to 7, but they're really not comfortable leading a den of, say, 20, and that might be what you need to do for a little while, is have a larger den with some parent helping stations. So the skill set to manage a larger group, like what a teacher does in a classroom, a larger group versus a small group, those skills might be different. And so it's something to think about as you're going through your pack planning. It is also something to think about is to have succession planning for all the roles. I highlighted den leaders, but every role needs to have some succession planning to think about who's the next person that could be taking over our committee chair if they're getting ready to move over, or our cub master, or our advancement chair. All those roles need to be thought about ahead of time. So that you aren't in a bind. Who's the next person we're training up and bringing along in that succession planning. And that leads to a really strong program. If you have that, our strongest Cub Scout packs we see have that kind of succession planning where they have somebody that's in line to be learning the material, to be even maybe trying out doing the different things with different tasks, is a great place. You want to have all your leaders in place ideally before recruiting, so that you have a smooth transition, a strong program, and that helps with retention because you're already ready to go. Now, with the explosive growth part, you may not have been able to have that because we're in a new situation. But ideally, you would be able to have that all in place before recruiting. And so maybe for next year, these are ideas that you're going to be using. But for right now, we're still going to give you good skills and ideas on how to do that. So that's a bit about why. Why is it important to do this?
Mm-hmm. One of the funny things about doing this show, Audrey, is that sometimes we get questions. You and I and people who are in this business, we know everything, and we just sort of assume everybody knows things. Well,
I wouldn't say that, but I do know who to ask.
But I mean, yes, exactly. We know the technical aspects of the program. But for an example, Getty in the comments asked, "Is Boy Scouts the same as Cub Scouts?" That's actually a good question. It's all part of the same organization. It's not called Boy Scouts anymore. It's called Scouts BSA. That's the program for older kids. Cub Scouts is the program for younger kids up to around 5th grade or so. There you go. Very good, Hannah. Our commenters are always good about answering each other's questions. Very good. Yes.
And then we even have the older youth programs above that.
Yes.
So 14
it's
up to
all
21.
a part of the same organization, but it's not the same program. So actually, I'm glad they asked that question. That's a great question. I remember when our good friend Gina joined the organization, we had a conversation. She didn't know what the difference between Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts and Eagle Scouts was.
Right.
So these are things that we've learned. I don't mean to say, Audrey, I know everything. Good point. We don't know everything, but we do know some of these basics, and we know who to ask if we have questions.
Yeah, so Cubs is basically family oriented and age appropriate for the grade levels. The Scouts is youth led. And so that is the difference between Scouts BSA, the older ones, versus family scouting where it's adult led.
Yes, very good. So speaking of adult-led, we're talking today, our topic is choosing strong adult leaders. And, a lot of us have heard the story about, or heard a story about a den leader who was asked to be a den leader, and that maybe isn't their thing. They weren't comfortable doing that. They did it anyway. Maybe they felt pressure to do it. Maybe no one else would do it. That's going to probably decrease the chances of that person being a successful den leader. They probably have a role, but maybe it's not a den leader. So as Audrey said, depends on what you're good at. I was comfortable getting up in front of folks and speaking passionately about scouting because that's what I do. Not so comfortable with balancing a budget, trying to figure out how much we need to raise with this certain fundraiser. There are roles for everybody, and it's a good idea to make sure everybody finds their right role. We do know that strong leadership makes a huge difference in the experience of a Cub Scout. As Audrey said, every Scout deserves an enthusiastic, trained leader. Okay, so we've established that. Now, what kind of resources do we have to offer someone who's looking for new leaders? Where do they start?
Right. So where do we start? That's a great question. So as you alluded to, really you start before. You start before there is a need for leader selection. In that you want your pack to be a warm, welcoming environment. A Scout is kind and courteous and those kinds of things. And so that should be demonstrated at the pack level. You want it to be warm and welcoming to all parents as they're coming in. So you have that new member person and you have a welcome team and you just make them feel very, very much a part of this community. Because that was one of the things we learned at a previous Cub things is that families want to be part of a community. If they feel connected to that community, then they stay. And that begins right off the bat when they first come. So you want to get them involved with tasks, little tasks, small tasks, everything, from maybe bringing snacks to whatever. We've done Cub chats on that, exactly how to get parents involved. There's various different ways through boards and things like that. But just so that they can see that everybody is contributing and that is part of the community is that people contribute. People are welcomed and they contribute to this volunteer structure. You also want to have your parent meeting within 10 days of your joining. You want that also to be so that they have a culture of inclusion, like parents are part of this. It's not just this leader out here. Parents are part of this and explaining all about what's going on and making sure they feel welcome there. not every job requires a title, as we're talking about. The den leader is definitely a title, and it has certain registration and training restrictions and youth protection and all those kinds of things. But other things like, popcorn chair may not, but that is still a title. But there's lots of other helping roles that people can have. And so find those places where you can include them so that they get used to being involved. They get used to being a part of this community, and they feel connected and therefore buy-in and ownership to this community, so that in future they may be able to go to the next step. We have done, there's a family talent survey is a handy tool for PACs as the beginning stage. Before we get to them as a full leader, they need to have some skills and buy-in. Yep, and there's the family talent survey, and that is available on the national website, scouting.org. And there's the QR codes. Those are so helpful. Really appreciate that. It goes over, and you might find out things about these parents. They have like woodworking tools. Wow, wouldn't that be awesome at Pinewood Derby time? They're great. They're accountants, or they're coaches, or there's all sorts of ways you could. Exactly, he's got it on his phone. So that's a really handy tool, and we really encourage PACs to use that as a first step, just to find out who your parents are, what are their skills, what are their resources, what backgrounds do they have, and then tap into that. And so I'm going to refer you to the Cub Chat Live archive on how to get them involved, but really that is the first steps, and this is a handy tool to do that. Then, once you determine that you actually need a leader, there's a brochure called Selecting Cub Scout Leaders, and that is also on the website. And it walks you through exactly what you need to do for a quote unquote titled leader. So these are folks like your den leaders, your committee chairs, your cub masters, your committee members, things like that do actually have a title beyond the helpers. And there is the QR code. Excellent. Thank you so much. So this is a great resource. So the first place that you would start, it is also on, you can go down scouting.org if you didn't have this QR code handy, but this is the fastest way to get there. Yep, exactly. That's what it looks like.
It's fast.
Exactly. And so it says the first step is to contact the committee chair. That's their responsibility to contact the chartered organization rep. Chartered organizations have the final authority on approval for leaders. They need to be included in or run the selection process. So the committee chair would have a discussion with the charter organization representative and ask them, I'm so used to saying rep, and ask them how they'd like to handle this situation. Would they prefer to manage the selection team themselves, or would they prefer the committee chair run it, and then they review the candidates that are submitted to them? So that is an important discussion. You then would want 2 to 3 other adults on your selection team. And then the recommended practice is that you, as we talked about, we kind of alluded to it already, is start discussing the skills necessary for this job. As we talked about, a den leader is going to have different skills than the treasurer. And so talk about what skills are needed for this particular role. Don't identify names at this time. Just talk about skills, because like I said, if it's a small group, that might be different skills than an outgoing cub master. You need, energy and fun. But a den leader might be a smaller group person who wants to be some enthusiasm, but doesn't necessarily have to be a large group enthusiasm. So think about the skills, go through, identify, and you can use the form. The last page of the form has a listing for where to identify all the skills, kind of a brainstorming, what do we need? And this can be useful many times. It doesn't have to be just the one time. And then you identify which is the critical skills, which is the non-negotiable, because nobody is going to have everything. I mean, sadly. That was true. But what are the absolute critical things that you need for this role? There's an ideal, and then there's what must happen. And so if you identify that, that's the next step.
Yes. So Audrey made a really interesting point there. The first thing you do is not identify the people, but identify the skills that you need to fill those different categories. The next question I'm going to have for Audrey is, how do you then identify the people? But before we do that, I just want to give a few quick shout outs. PAC 367, Carlos is checking in from Valley Stream, New York. Carlos, thank you for watching. Wendy says she's been lucky to have families with younger siblings. So as the leaders start out with the younger Dems, we already know a bit about those parents. They age out and then the younger ones come in. It makes it easier. Plus, they know they've got that lion den leader lined up. Very good, Wendy. Very, very
good
cool.
Succession planning there then.
Yes. Hike Mike asks, is there a list of the available volunteer opportunities I can hand out? Audrey, what do we think? What do we have for Hike Mike?
Yes, there is. On the national website, there's the welcome packets would be a great. It discusses what each role needs to do and is responsible for. And then there's the training on the national website. There's also, if you go under, thank you, program Cub Scouts, perfect. And then you click, there'll be a toggle. One says parents, one says leaders. You go to leaders, and then there's all the resources. And so there's some great lists and some great things under there.
Very nice. I want to address a real quick question from Daisy, who asks, how do you start a Cub Scout pack? Daisy, I would answer that first of all by saying there's probably a pack near you already. You just don't know about it. Go to beascout.org, enter your zip code, and there's most likely one already. I love the enthusiasm, but there's probably a pack near you already. If there isn't, you can go down that road of starting a new pack. Contact your local council. There are folks in your area. There's the local council locator would probably be the place to start, Audrey, to do that. Do you think?
Right. If you put it in, yes, that would be a good place to start. There is a minimum number of things that have to happen and some paperwork that has to happen in a charter organization that has to happen. So there's steps.
There are steps.
So absolutely. I started a new pack with a team of people myself when my boys were in. Our school didn't have one. So it's definitely doable. You do need support and you do need some minimums. But I'm excited about that enthusiasm. It might be easier to visit packs around you to see what they're like and to see if maybe that would be easier to fit in a strong one that's already going, and then maybe future start one, or maybe there isn't one at all, and that's why you need to do that. So yes, you definitely need to talk to your council office.
Yes.
And a council is a local area.
Like a regional office, basically.
Yeah.
Yes. I think if you Google
like that,
BSA,
how to describe the council.
Yes. I don't remember the website, but if you Google BSA local council locator, it will take you to a site where you can enter your zip code, and it will tell you a phone number that you can call for basically your local BSA office. That's where you start. But again, while we appreciate the enthusiasm, there could be a Cub Scout pack right next door to you. You don't necessarily need to start a new one, but I'm sure they could use volunteers, as we're talking about now. Wendy says,
and the key that he said was beascout.org. If you put your zip code in there and Cub Scouts, you click Cub Scouts, that will tell you all the local ones in and around you. And that'd be a great starting point just to see.
Yes. Wendy says they've been lucky to roll in a new committee chair every 3 years or so. So the previous person is still there to support the new chair as they move on. That's the ideal situation, I think, right?
We're gonna get into that.
Yes,
but that is the ideal. That is the model. Well done.
Pack 2540 from Killeen, Texas is checking in from the Longhorn Council. David has an interesting question. Audrey, maybe we could address this real quick. Any suggestions on finding capable and driven committee members when you have kind of a small rural community? Does that make a difference, do you think, Audrey, if they're living in a small rural area as opposed to an area where it's more concentrated with tons of people?
I think that it might be more difficult, but it also might be easier if people are really dedicated to their community things, often in smaller areas. I know I grew up in a smaller area, and like the high school, things around the high school were a big deal in the whole community, not just those going to it. So I think it kind of depends, but that does lead into how to identify those prospective leaders.
All right, let's do it.
So that's actually a great question.
Question number 3, how do we identify prospective leaders, Audrey?
Right. So then you take those skill sets that we talked about, and then you match them to actual people. And so kind of what that question was asking about is, where do you find those people? Well, obviously they can be from the pack, and that is usually where people look for first things, is from the parents, but it doesn't have to be. As long as you end up with charter organization approval at the end, it can be adults from the charter organization. So if you have a church group who is your charter organization, there might be members in that really enjoy working with youth and building positive citizens, physical fitness and all the things that we stand for. And that would be, an option, is to ask if there are any people there within your community. Former leaders. I am a former leader, and I was tapped in to do this role. So there are lots of folks out there who, maybe left because of life changes or whatever, but now they're in a different place, in a different time of life, and maybe they can be pulled back in, and they're great resources. And they actually might have more time available than the young parents themselves. So that's another option. Alumni associations. So there is a National Alumni Association for BSA, and that might be people in your area. They're looking to serve and keep the movement going. So that might be another idea. Relatives or grandparents, again, it's the time thing. So our national commissioner, and you've seen Cub Scout Mike on here several times, he's a grandparent, and he loves being involved with his grandsons in scouting. And that is just, they do it as a whole family, son, mom, grandma, all of them are involved in it. And so that's a great way to keep a family all connected, and some wonderful resources there. Other things are community leaders. I know doctors and things like that have stepped up and just want to promote positive character development, and various different leaders, firefighters, so on, that in the community that really are for the positive impact we bring into the world. And there's a lot of negative, and they want to promote that positive. So those are some places. And the second thought would be not to pre-eliminate somebody. I was just doing some interviewing myself for some team things, and somebody was very busy, and you had given them the opportunity. This is something we think that you are able to do and do well. And maybe they will reprioritize some things in our life. Maybe they're ready for a change. Maybe they already have a busy schedule, but they're going to decide to choose this over something else. So don't eliminate them without giving them the choice to pursue this or not. So those are some tips on how to identify the people with the skill set.
Audrey is giving us tons and tons of good information, folks. If you're not getting it all, don't worry. This video will live on the Facebook page you're watching it on right now, along with all of our other Cub Chat Live episodes. There you go. Brian, thank you so much. Right on cue. Audrey, you kind of touched on something that I think sparked a question from Sadia, who asks, if I understand this correctly, what is the absolute pack leadership role that should be filled? I think what they mean is there are some requirements, like you said, Cub Master, committee chair, den leaders, and then there are some sort of unofficial roles, right? Just helpers who may not have official roles. But do you know off the top of your head, Audrey, in order to have a pack, you have to have a Cub Master, you have to have a committee chair, you have to have a certain number of den leaders. Do you know the numbers on that?
Gosh, I haven't looked that up in a while. Okay. I believe it's 5. Okay. But we would need to verify that.
Okay. So Sadia, to answer the question, there is a minimum.
You need a charter organization representative and a committee chair. Those two can be the same person, but those roles need to be filled. I believe you need a Cub Master, and I believe you definitely need a den leader.
A couple of den leaders, I think, right? Yeah. Right.
There is a minimum. And that is in the official paperwork, and I would refer you to that.
Yes.
But that's an idea on that. I haven't started it in a long time, so I haven't.
Right. But I would say, Sadia, the most Cub Scout packs go beyond that minimum, and they have a lot of other folks who step up either officially or unofficially.
Right. There's so many helpers that don't have an official title. If you are an official titled role, especially the den leaders, the Cub Master, the committee chair, you need to have a formal application. You need to be youth protection trained, which includes a background check, and then you need to go through the basic training levels for your position. And those are requirements, and those are in a brochure we're going to talk about here really soon.
We're almost there. And I would add that some packs have folks who they might just say, this person is our social media coordinator, for example.
Right, a communications lead,
photos,
who does the texting and that. They just need to take care of that
You may have
role,
a
that bit.
photographer, a troop
Mhm.
pack photographer, and that's what they do because they're good at that. That doesn't mean they're
They can
officially
even be just
registered.
a blue and gold
There you go.
chair, just working on that one event. They don't have to
Yes.
be a
That, yes,
registered.
that yeah. Every year they're in charge of the blue and gold banquet, right? Perfectly, yes.
Mhm.
Lots of flexibility on purpose because every pack is different and the
Because
leadership is
people
going to
may
be
only
different.
have a zone that they're available,
Yep.
or an
Yep.
interest in party planning, or whatever it is. So
Yes.
lean into that. Lean
Uh,
into those interests.
a few
Mhm.
more quick shout outs before we get to our next topic. Rusty says hello from pack 84. Thank you, Rusty. Rick is coming to us from Oklahoma City. Thank you, Rick. Appreciate that. That's in the Last Frontier Council. Um, let's go on to our next question, I think, Audrey. Once we've identified prospective leaders, what do we do next?
Well, yes, and that's a really important thing. So we are not encouraging the trap them in a room and force everybody to do that. That is hopefully the message you're not getting here. That is those people often will ghost you because they didn't commit to it fully. They didn't feel the importance of it. They were unaware, and they just said yes at the moment, and that's not an ideal. So
Yes.
we're giving you an ideal situation. So how do we ask them once we've identified them? You want to make it important, right? Because this role is important. The strength of your pack and retaining those scouts and their experience is um, related to what a good job they do. And our survey, like the last Cub Chat we talked about, the 5 things that the parents are so important, and one of them is a good den experience. So a well-planned program, communication, and a feeling of welcome in their community. Those are critical for keeping people in scouting. So this is critical. So it should be treated as a critical step. So just like you would with a job, you would want to set a meeting. Now, it could be before or after a pack meeting, but don't do it like in the middle when kids are rushing around and they're not able to really give it full attention. Set a meeting. Say, okay, half an hour before the pack meeting, would you be available? Or half an hour afterwards, or whatever. I wouldn't recommend that, honestly, but some people have to do that because of time. I would recommend setting a separate time out, and it can be a Zoom meeting. It doesn't have to be in person. I would encourage in person, but sometimes, like we talked about, the rural communities that are very far apart, make it work how you can. I would bring another adult with you because, again, it's another voice saying, we value you and we think that you are the right person for this candidate. And then it does give that sense of weight and importance that, look, at somebody else really thinks that this is what I should be doing. You also want to bring a job description so they know what it is that they're committing to. And that is part of those welcome pamphlets I just recommended, is that they have a job descriptions in them of what is a den leader, what is a committee chair, what is a treasurer. And they list that out there so they know what they're committing to. The other thing that you would do is let them know that a team of people, or the selection committee, thought that they would be the perfect person for this role. So sometimes that adds weight, and it also adds consideration to them that they may not, have thought that they were capable of this role, but there's a set of people who think that they can. Then if they ask for time to consider the role, that's actually a really good sign. That means that's a person who's thoughtfully thinking about this. And when they say yes, then they will actually commit and do a good job in the role. So those are some suggestions on how to ask somebody to be in a leader position.
Boy, every once in a while, Audrey, you say something that really, you do it a lot, something that really strikes home. Bringing a second adult with you, that's a huge thing to me, because, if you are the Cub Master or the committee chair, you are seen, rightly or wrongly, as someone who's done this before, someone who just knows about scouting. Another adult is someone maybe they can relate a little bit more, someone else who's new to the pack, who doesn't know as much, someone who's been through this before, who can say, I trust these people. I didn't know anything when I first signed up,
Mm-hmm.
and look how I turned out, that kind of thing. Super helpful. I agree with that 100%. We're inching up on 2:30, guys, but we've got a few more topics to cover. So Audrey, if you're okay with it, we're going to keep going.
Yeah, no, we need to finish the mission.
We got a few more things to play. So we appreciate everybody who's tuning in. Rob suggests that you pay attention to which scouts are engaged, or which parents are engaged during the meetings and activities. Agree with that, Rob? That's a great way to identify prospective leaders. Okay, so once you've identified the leader, then you make the ask.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do if they say yes?
Well, if they say yes, you want to follow up immediately. You want to obviously thank them, write them a note, write them an email. I do like handwritten notes. I think that adds a really personal touch. Not required, but that's what I like to do.
That's great.
Give them the resources they need. Give them the new welcome new member guide. And there's like one for den leaders for tigers and lions, wolves and bears. There's one for committee members. Give them that because it gives you a step-by-step. Do your registration, do your youth protection, then all the next steps so they know what it is. It has a job description. It tells them the next steps all in one place. So that's a very handy thing. And then the den leader guide, if it's a den leader, the resources they're going to need to do their job. I definitely give them recognition. So a formal announcement that we're excited about this new to the communication channels, however your communication channels work. And announcement in the PAC meeting as a welcome. And, some even do ceremonies, a leader induction ceremony, and that adds again, weight and value to the ask and to the answer. Then, as we talked about earlier, one of the participants just mentioned, have a mentor or guide continue to support them. And I can't stress this enough. Totally. Because a lot of them go, hey, I said yes, I got these things thrown at me, and then I never got any more support, and that's tragic. So you need to have a mentor or support person identified with that new den leader, especially on how they can transition into the role. And if you've done this well ahead of time before recruiting, maybe they've had months to learn the new systems and get into the new practices, especially like if you're a treasurer or something like that. So highly encourage the past leader to mentor them. Maybe the Cub Master has extra time. Maybe it's another outside committee member, but somebody to mentor them is very, very important to keep them connected.
I would say, just staying in touch with someone who has graciously agreed. They're brand new to the pack. They don't know anything.
Well, especially our tigers and
they've
lions.
Agreed to be a tiger den leader.
80% of our families are brand new to scouting. They do not know anything about scouting, so they really need mentorship.
So having someone just to say, hey, thanks so much for volunteering, following up. If you have any more questions as we move forward, not just for this week, but over the next few months, as we go on through the season and everything like that. Yes, that would be huge. So that's what
I have a mentor in my role, and I rely on her heavily.
And everything.
Yes. I'm willing to learn everything. Exactly. I'll say that.
Exactly. And we know who to ask if we don't know. Yes. Okay. So we've covered what to do if they say yes. But Audrey, what if they say no?
Right. So sometimes they do say no. Yep. And there's all different reasons. It could be just poor timing. We don't know what's going on in all the rest of their lives. But I would then communicate. Why? Ask them why. Is it, and what are they willing to do? If they say, no, I can't be a den leader, but then ask them, what are they willing to do? Are you willing to, help the next den leader out with, being maybe one of the action stations? Maybe it's that brand new 20-person den, and you just don't feel comfortable running a 20-person den, but you're willing to be one of the parents that helps at an action station that they transition into smaller groups, 7 around each station or something like that. Maybe that is, and that's a super valuable role. What else could they be a part of? So make them feel like this is an okay answer. This is a good answer. You want them. Ideally, a no is better than being ghosted, being just them never showing up again. So appreciate that. And who else do they know that they could recommend? Maybe they have a community person that you are unaware of that has that skill set. So ask them for, essentially references. Who else do they know? And then you would then move to the next prospect, because you had a list of a couple names. You have an idea, maybe your top priority, but maybe then there's the next one. And this one maybe doesn't have everything that you need, but they could be supported. Maybe they can, bring along an assistant, bring along another parent to help them with that role. And they could still do a good job with some support. So the bottom line is that you need to value people. And so whatever you do, make sure that they feel valued in that equation. Even if they say no, they can still be a part of things and can still be valued. And the research says that the number one reason that adults do not volunteer is that they were never asked.
Interesting. Yeah. So I agree 100%. If someone says no to whatever they've been asked, it doesn't mean they can't do something else. The more helpers you have, almost always the better. I have a hard time imagining a situation in which, oh no, I've got too much help, guys.
And personal asking is what needs to happen, not the room. Hey, anybody want to be a den leader? That is not effective. Personal asking is what this statistic means, that they weren't asked personally.
Yes. As a quick reminder, again, we've thrown a lot of information at you today. You feel free to go back and watch this video once it's over. It will be available on this Facebook page, along with all of our other past episodes right at that link right there. A few last quick shout outs, Audrey. Pack 007 from Arizona. Very cool. Laureen is checking in. Sarah from Troop 101 in Morganville. Thank you for watching. Wendy says lots of great information and resources. Thank you for sharing this. A lot of folks in the comments posted some PDF links to some scouting.org documents. As a reminder, if it shows up on scouting.org, you can trust it. There might be some stuff on there that's on different websites, well-meaning websites. Just double check that stuff. But a lot of good links posted from scouting.org. Rob comments, our friend Rob says that when it comes to having two people ask, maybe it's harder to say no to two people than it is to one. Thank you, Rob. Good point. Appreciate that. Lots of good comments and a lot of folks answering other questions in our comments. So appreciate that. It might be, if you have more questions, worth it just to scroll through the comments. You may have an answer right there. Our viewers are always very, very helpful.
We might actually be having a follow-up Cub Chat live next week that might also be helping to give further information on this topic as we try to give you valuable of-the-moment resources. So we have our fingers in figuring out what's going on. We're seeing this exponential growth, and so we're trying to provide you with resources on the next steps. What do we do with this exponential growth? So there's going to be some good ideas next week too.
And you and I both have learned, Audrey, that's one of the neat things about doing Cub Chat Live is, unlike a leader's handbook that you publish once every 4 years, we can react to things as they happen. And the thing that is happening right now is that we've got a lot of growth, like you said, which is great news.
Fabulous problem to have.
Awesome. Yeah, we'd much rather have that problem. And Audrey's here. I do my best to help, to provide you guys with resources and answers. So yes, be sure and tune in next Friday, right, for another episode of Cub Chat Live. Before we let you go, though, Audrey, any final thoughts, anything else we need to let the folks know about not just recruiting leaders, but recruiting the right leaders?
Right. I just think that the beginning was we need to do our best, and doing our best sometimes means that we need some planning and some thinking and some strategizing, and to give our scouts the very best that they can have with a qualified, strong, and enthusiastic leaders.
Yes, very, very cool. We appreciate everyone watching today. Audrey, we appreciate your time as always. Thank you to all the viewers. I hope everybody has a really good weekend. I hope the weather's holding up where you are. It's awful nice down here in Texas. I hope it's nice for everybody else. Enjoy the weekend. Thank you for watching Cub Chat Live. We'll see you next week. Bye, everybody. Thanks, Audrey.